Hello, and welcome to the May 15th, 2019 edition of Shrewsbury Matters, a monthly show that presents a different perspective on the town's politics and problems. My name is John Lukach. I have an important announcement concerning this show, but I'll save it for the end of the show. The topics for tonight deal with the recent annual town election, and also the articles that are going to be on the upcoming annual town meeting warrant, which is going to be the town meeting is going to start next Monday, the 20th. Anyway, on the town election, in particular the selectmen's race, the turnout was much higher than usual, 17%. I know that sounds low, but by annual town election standards, that's a pretty good number. And so I guess that's somewhat encouraging. On the flip side, an outsider, Jean-Guy Ananth, made a very strong showing, although he fell short. And I believe this is unfortunate because now the Board of Selectmen will continue to have no independent voices on it. All of the board members will continue to march in lockstep, never even just questioning the status quo for fear of upsetting the town's ruling clique. This clique has become a serious danger to the financial health of the town and will only become worse over the next few years as the town's population continues to grow because of town officials' poor decisions on adding mixed-use zones, the failure to correct weak zoning regulations, and other major issues. So now let's move right over to the articles on the annual town meeting warrant. First of all, there's been some formatting changes in the budget, which I don't think are all to the good. For example, the town budget article, this year it's numbered 11. The format for presenting the budget article has been changed significantly. One minor but irritating issue was moving row data into a column format. This makes it harder for town meeting members to make direct comparisons to the budget figures in prior year books. In other words, when I do my comparison, when I'm looking at the new budget numbers, I like to compare it to the prior year book to see, first of all, to see if there were any changes, and sometimes there are changes. Like, for example, a budget number for one town department that was approved last year that shows up in the 2019 budget book. This year, that number may have changed, and you're not going to know that that number has changed unless you refer to the prior year book. So you need that kind of information. More seriously, some of the subheadings have been removed, making it more difficult to make these, to figure out what's going on. And then most seriously, the new format this time does not have footnotes for most of the accounts, with the exception of debt and interest accounts. In the past booklets, footnotes would explain unusual activity in a particular account. So removing such footnotes will make it that much harder to understand and question significant changes in budget accounts. Unfortunately, I believe, this is probably by design. After all, town officials would prefer if town meeting members asked no questions about the proposed budget, but just voted for it. And unfortunately, too many town meeting members are too lazy to ask intelligent questions about the budget. So I guess, both sides, at least most of the town meeting members, are probably happy with getting less information. I'm not. A second major article within that budget article is the school budget. And in the introductory section of the report and recommendations of the Finance Committee, and the book I'm referring to is this book. It's pretty much the same book every year, although this year they have made formatting changes in it and made some changes that I don't particularly think are good. But anyway, if you go to go to page 6, you'll see that the committee printed out a budget summary, and what they did is that the committee accepted the town manager's presentation of the total budget in one of his presentations. But if you look at that, if you look at the middle of the page under expenditure, admin, and finance, there's an asterisk next to the, that line, and it's footnoted. And that footnote is very much misleading. The footnote says that the expenditures in the admin and finance line, but only in the admin and finance line, contains some education expenditures. Since none of the other lines are footnoted, the clear implication is that none of the other department expenditures listed include educational expenditures on behalf of the school department. This is patently false and can be easily demonstrated. Other town department lines contain significant school expenditures as well. And as I said, this fact can easily be demonstrated. For example, if one goes to the 2020 school budget request, which was part of the packet sent to all town meeting members, if you go to page 22, there is a chart showing fiscal summary, all sources. It shows that total fiscal year 2019 town expenditures, that is the cost of services provided by other town departments to the school department, were estimated at almost $23 million. That's already more than the amount shown in the Finance Committee's book for expenditures from other departments, the admin department. So we already know that that number is wrong. In total fiscal year 2019 school spending, again on this fiscal summary all funds, says we're estimated at almost $23 million. Is that the actual number for town expenditures in support of the school system? $22,882,860. That's on page 22 of the school budget request. And total FY 2020 school spending will be estimated at around $102 million. So why do the town manager, the selectmen, and the finance committee ignore school expenditures by other town departments on behalf of the school department? Quite simply, it's because they want to convince residents of the need for ever larger increases in the school budget, and that's just dishonest. If you stop and think about it, total spending by the school department is likely to be $102 million next year. That's well over 75% of the town's total spending budget for 2020. And yet, what you'll see in these documents, both in what the Finance Committee booklet and in the school budget, is they'll say, "Oh well, the school budget is only 50% of the town's budget. Oh, and Shrewsbury, they're doing such a lousy job, supporting the school system." No, those are the wrong numbers to be looking at. And again, as I said, that's by design. They want to mislead the public. One other important point in the school budget package. On page 49, and let me go to page 49. Page 49, you have to go to the back of the book to get some good information about the account that represents 85% of total school spending, which is salaries. So on page, page 49, the total number of school FTE positions for fiscal year 2020 is shown as 871. That's 871 full-time equivalent positions. Now, prior to the 2014 operating budget override, within a year or so of that, there were only around 700 full-time equivalent positions in the school system. Well, if you figure out that they've added, that number of positions, let's say about 170 positions since that time, Total school staffing will have increased by about 170 full-time equivalent positions, or almost 25%. But now let's take a look at school enrollment over that period of time. School enrollment over that period of time has only increased by about 200 students, or about 3%. And to get that information, you get a rough idea if you go to page 31. Page 31 shows enrollment. It doesn't show the number for 2014, it shows the number for 2015, but there wasn't that much of an increase. So I'm using a roughly 6,000 number to come up with a 200 student increase over this period of time. So again, that increase of 200 students is only a 3% increase in student enrollment since 2014. Comparing these two percentage increases, one has to ask why school and town officials fail to address and have to justify why so many new school staff have been added when student enrollment has grown so little. The answer, of course, is that comparing these percentage increases would be somewhat embarrassing and would make it harder to justify additional staffing increases such as the increase that is going to be taking place this year. But we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to, and they used to show over the past several years, the budget book used to showed staffing by department and by grade level for several years. Well, they removed that. They don't want people to look at that. They don't want people to notice the increases in staffing and therefore the increases in the budget that are needed to support those staffing increases. Yeah, so I mean, it's all part of the game. Okay, so enough of the school. There's a lot more I could say about the school department and their budgets and the way they present their data and the problems with the way they present their data. But I'll move on now, and we'll get to the zoning articles in the booklet, which is right here. So let's go to Article 27. Article 27. Here we are. All right. So Article 27, just to give you a brief description, what they're doing is saying that they're saying that they're going to place a restriction on what they call the floor area ratio, where the floor area ratio, the total square footage of the building, cannot exceed a certain percentage of the total lot size. Okay? Now, the Article 28 is designed to address problems where people will buy, will come up with all these crazy lot configurations, a lot size that's an eighth of an acre over here and an eighth of an acre over here, and they'll connect a very narrow, 6 foot, 8 foot wide, they'll buy from their neighbors, an 8-foot strip to connect them so that they can build on what was previously an unbuildable parcel of land. So this second article, Article 28, is called, what do they call it? Well, area, frontages, yard, and lot coverage requirements. So that's a brief description of those two. Anyway, regarding these two, these are good articles. They are long overdue. I don't understand why anybody would oppose them. And the reason why I say this is because tightening Shrewsbury's residential zoning bylaws and eliminating the many loopholes in these bylaws should have been a top priority for the last 18 plus years. Back in 2001, a master plan was adopted. And that master plan addressed zoning issues. That master plan, they brought in a consultant, and he said that Shrewsbury's residential areas were essentially built out. Well, guess what? Since that time, we've seen hundreds of new residential units come in. And part of the problem is the selectmen advocating for these mixed-use development, which take land that was reserved for commercial development and uses significant portions of it for additional residential development. But the other problem is these weak zoning laws we have, which have a lot of loopholes in them, which these two articles are intended to address. So, why didn't the master plan, why didn't they, when they were adopting the master plan, why didn't they look into all these zoning bylaws and do a thorough analysis and fix all of the zoning bylaws that we currently have? Shrewsbury has one of the weakest collection of zoning bylaws, residential zoning bylaws in Massachusetts. You can, if you read some of the local papers in other towns, when they tighten up their restrictions on zoning for residential development, they really tighten them up, okay? And that's all to the good. I mean, Shrewsbury has about the densest population for a town in all of Massachusetts. That's been stated publicly by at selectmen's meetings when they talked about the what do you call it, the groundwater article that they're going to be charging people for the groundwater that runs off their properties. They said that Shrewsbury was considered to be 99%. You know, so again, we're so dense, and yet we keep allowing people, because of these weaknesses in our zoning laws, letting people develop even more, even denser. It's a real mistake. Now, having said that, this isn't the first set of articles that have revised the zoning laws to try to address some of these issues. It was, a few years ago, they took a couple of baby steps and came up with a few articles that did fix some issues. But there are still many more egregious zoning problems with our bylaws. But again, Article 27 and 28 are small but significant steps in fixing the town's residential zoning bylaws. Of course, by now it would not surprise me if these bylaw changes have come too late to have much of an impact, since most of the damage may already have been done. But town meeting should approve them anyway. But town meeting should do more. It should insist that town officials review the zoning bylaws and offer amendments to the bylaws that will eliminate all loopholes. Okay, so now let's go to the, I'm going to just skip back to the petition articles, and I'll just have a few brief comments on those. Let's see, Article 20. Article 20 is a pesticide bylaw. Basically, you know, again, some of the, you know, I've written petitions myself, and I think they have a practical purpose, and I'm sure the people who presented these articles think they're practical and have value. But some of these, I think, are sort of ridiculous. You don't need a bylaw. I mean, the town already uses, tries to use the safest pesticides available. Writing a bylaw for that purpose seems to me to be, you know, a waste of time. Article 21 is on the problem with the hexavalent chromium that was discovered a couple of years ago in Shrewsbury. Evidently, it's leaking from an old plant that has long been closed. Again, what they're recommending is to retire 3 wells and build new ones. Again, this is an area that does in fact require some expertise. It involves testing. The state is involved in monitoring. We're doing monitoring wells. I think the town is taking adequate precautions along these lines. So this article, I think, is somewhat superfluous. Then Article 22 has to do with the quiet enjoyment of the historic district near the middle of town. Well, again, if my question is why limit that to the historic district? All neighborhoods should be able to have a quiet enjoyment of their area of town. So why not do this for all the major roads in town? Again, I don't think this really has been well thought out. Article 23, a town comparison committee. Well, town departments already do comparisons. You can see all kinds of comparisons that the school department does when they want to make these comparisons to other towns in terms of school spending and SAT scores, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And other town departments do the same thing when necessary, usually under the auspices of the town manager's office. So, and if people really think that the town departments aren't doing enough of a job of doing these comparisons, well, they can get together and do that informally without anybody, without the town having to set up a formal committee. I mean, I did that myself. I make comparisons all the time on my own. So if these people who are presenting this petition want to do so, you know, 8 or 10 of them get together, start collecting information from other towns, put it together and present it at town meeting or to the selectmen. Post it on the town website. Okay, that's the way to do it. Article 24 on term limits. Obviously, it's euphemistically called something else. The practical effect is it's a kind of term limit law. I'm generally in favor of that. I think the term limits being proposed here are a little bit too restrictive, but I think it's a moot point because this is going to be decisively defeated, and while I think that's unfortunate, just the way things are. And then the last article is, petition article is the Historic Preservation Bylaw. This has been brought up before. I think given all the questions that continue to remain and the fact that the committee that put this work together decided to dissolve itself and then it was taken over by somebody else and there's all kinds of issues, I guess on balance, I think you need to make sure you have a really well-written plan. Otherwise, you are impinging on homeowners, and I don't think enough. This was thought through enough. So I would probably vote no on that, barring some last-minute major changes in the article. So let me get to the news I wanted to mention on the show. This will most likely be the last show in this series, as my wife and I are planning to move in June. And I believe that Shrewsbury Media Connection only allows Shrewsbury residents to produce shows. So while I might want to continue, I think it's time for me to move on. So anyway, why are we moving? Well, we decided it was time to downsize into an over 55 community, one that has all its it's all on one floor. My wife has been saying for years that it is time for me to stop mowing the lawn, shoveling snow, and doing other yard work. And I have finally given in. I also think that after 37 years living in the same home, my wife was looking forward to establishing a new home. And I guess I am feeling the same way, or at least starting to. But where are we moving to? Well, we looked at several condominium complexes, both in Shrewsbury and in neighboring towns. Then by chance, I talked to a next neighbor who just happened to be selling his one-level condo unit in an over 55 community in West Boylston. It turned out to be exactly what my wife and I were looking for. So that is where we are moving to. Knock on wood, assuming everything goes according to plan. I know my wife has another reason for preferring to leave Shrewsbury. For many years, she has been upset with me being involved involved actively in town politics and being an active town meeting member. And the reason why she was upset about it is because when I challenged the decisions of town officials over the years, my involvement has been stressful for her because it bothered her that town officials were frequently rude and obnoxious. It bothered her even more when eggs were thrown at our house and our cars, or when other pranks happened in our neighborhood. And I believe that it was town officials' attitude of condoning by their silence these activities, not just for me, but for other people in political life in the town who are on the outside of the ruling clique, that gave some residents in town, made them think that it was okay to harass people like me and my wife. I think that's a sad state of affairs. What really bothered me about this situation was when town officials and residents actually insulted my wife. I recall one web article even claiming that my wife had to teach at a private school because she wasn't good enough to teach in a public school. Well, my wife taught in a New York State public high school for 3 years before we moved to Shrewsbury. So one thing I should say is that one should never underestimate how ignorant some people can be when they are hiding behind the anonymity of the internet. And believe me, that's pretty ignorant. And when we moved here to Shrewsbury, my wife chose to stay home with our children until they entered school. And by the time that happened, there was no way she would have been hired in at least the Shrewsbury public school system, given my public criticisms of the Shrewsbury school system. So she did the next best thing. She went to work for a private school, and she was very happy doing so. And I know she did an excellent job there, as people who still work there will tell you. Well, that's about all I have to say. I do wish that the town will start to heed some of the other voices in town who are bringing up legitimate criticism of the way some of the decisions that town officials have made. Anyway, that's it for today's show, my last show. Thanks for watching this program for the past several months. I do wish Shrewsbury well, but I fear that the poor long-term planning and the poor decision-making of its town officials will cause many serious issues to arise for the town within the next 5 to 10 years. With that, I'll say goodbye and good luck to Shrewsbury.